Hey, so I've been eating plant-based for nearly 10 years, and in this video, I'm going to share everything I know now that I wish I knew back then. This is obviously immensely anecdotal, but this has absolutely changed my life. That said, in a decade eating this way, I've certainly made mistakes. There's been tweaks I've had to make along the way. There's also been some pleasant surprises too. I've been able to bust a lot of the myths and limiting beliefs I personally had about plant-based nutrition, but simultaneously, I can also see where people go wrong with some conventional plant-based diet advice. So I hope that sharing my results, reflections, and perspectives on those things can be of some use to you. Let's do it. Very quickly though, meal of the day. I almost forgot, even though I'm holding the bloody thing, but meal of the day, as we always do now, we've got one of these diverse bowls that I like doing. It's actually relatively simple, even though it looks quite fanciful. We've got bulgur wheat here, we've got some chickpeas, some sliced bell peppers, some sauerkraut, amazing for the gut, our fermented veggies, some red cabbage here in the center, some sliced cucumber. You can't see it, you'll have to take my word for it, but buried underneath, we've got a good old bed of watercress, and I've actually got some hemp seeds sprinkled over that you probably won't quite make out. And then the dressing, because otherwise this will be a little dry. If you're thinking that looks good, right, but it looks a little dry, we've got our tahini, lemon juice, and water combination here. I'm just going to drizzle over, and I've got to resist this delicious little plate, this delicious and nutritious little plate whilst I record this video. But let's get into tip number one, insight number one. First up, your biggest challenge in your opening couple of months being plant-based, guys, and you're not going to believe this one. This will surprise you, because the hardest part isn't anything to do with planning, thinking ahead, what can I eat in this restaurant, food availability, or what about certain nutrients that I've got to replace. Those are all challenges, but those are all the things you'd expect. In fact, I would argue the biggest curveball you're going to get thrown in your opening couple of months is honestly having to listen to all the schmucks in your personal life who never, this is the ironic thing, never said a damn word about nutrition in all your years before you started adopting a plant-based diet. The irony, the armchair nutrition experts that come out the woodwork. What about protein? What about B12? And look, their sentiments might be coming from a good place, but you are going to find it irritating, and I'm just managing your expectations ahead of time. And this is the ironic thing, especially with I'm talking about plant-based diets here, but when we think about the vegan aspect to this as well, everyone will make more drama about it than you, even though vegans are supposedly the loud ones, the preachy ones, the noisy ones, apparently. And you are just, the reality of this is you're going to have to find a way to make peace with that. You're going to have to be okay with that. It's only a small percentage of vegans, a tiny minority, that are kind of rambunctious and are noisy and are preachy. The rest of us actually, I find, can't be bothered with all of that nonsense, all of that fuss. We don't want the attention. We don't want to be sitting around a dinner table in a restaurant and people quizzing us on it necessarily, right? We just want to be left alone. Leave us to our choices, please. We're happy to explain it if the person is kind of being genuinely curious and inquisitive, and maybe in a one-on-one setting. But the sort of round table discussion that often gets going on this subject, and people get really, really triggered and insecure that you're judging them, or you think you're morally more righteous than them because you're following this plant-based methodology. And, you know, again, all the health aspects as well, the protein, the B12, being quizzed about that when you're very new to this, perhaps you're very uncomfortable with the idea of this. Honestly, my advice on all of this stuff, because it can feel overwhelming, it's just their story, guys. Don't personalize it. I know don't personalize it, excuse me. I know it can sometimes feel like a personal attack, but try not to bite. It's not about you. It's more about them. It's more about their story and their beliefs coming into this, whatever they've learned about food for the last 40 years. It's all being projected onto you now. So, of course, communicate with honesty, all right? Don't be afraid to tell people what you're doing, because that can end badly. Don't be embarrassed or try to hide it. Communicate with honesty, but do so respectfully, and just have your expectations in check that, look, you're going to get quizzed on this, and yeah, you want to be prepared for that, not shocked by that. You're going to get stick and judgment for this, even though you feel it's in your best interest. Even when you've explained to people, look, I really feel this is in my best interest. I'm really excited about doing this. I feel really hopeful. The research I've done I'm really compelled that this is a next good step for me. You're still going to get backlash, and you need to be fine with that. Insight/reflection number two from these 10 years. Yes, this nutrition approach can be amazing for weight loss, given the high fiber content coupled with the low caloric density of many whole plant foods, but it's not a magic pill. And I felt quite lucky and fortunate. I think I'm probably doing myself a disservice there. Maybe there was more strategy involved, but I did feel admittedly quite lucky at the time to lose 25 pounds in the 3 months after I transitioned to a plant-based diet in 2015. That blew my mind because for years prior, I was trying to really lose that extra body fat that I'd gained in my university years. And I'd have these little sort of 4 or 5, week weight loss sprints, but they were so aggressive, they felt so unsustainable to me at the time, that it wasn't long before I was binging my brains out and rebounding right back up the scale. I'm sure many of you that have tried this weight loss stuff in the past, you will resonate with that. And yeah, that's why I felt lucky, right? Finding a plant-based diet and it actually feeling sustainable to me and being able to stick at this for 3 months, and then obviously subsequently we've done 10 years. But 3 months, that was like, oh my goodness, this is a breakthrough. And the weight loss felt comparatively, it wasn't a breeze, it wasn't a walk in the park, but it felt comparatively really easy. But at the same time, that did shock me, but at the same time, and I found this quickly out after my initial 3 months, and I've also observed this in many other folks' behavior doing what I do online, watching those folks go plant-based, it didn't, this diet approach, it did not automatically fix my bad habits with food, my cravings, my emotional eating. It certainly wouldn't be the antidote necessarily. I could say it's energy. I could make the argument that it's been energy boosting for me, but it isn't sort of a quick fix anyway to any laziness that I had around exercise. So my advice to you in the strongest possible terms is do not treat this incredible way of eating like only a weight loss diet or that it's a means to an end to get to your ideal physique. It's so much more than that. And I think by suggesting that it's just a means to an end, a tool for you for weight loss, I think you're going to come from the wrong mental frame, admittedly. I've seen this over and over with folks. I think there's not enough sustainability and longevity baked into that kind of thinking. And I think you'll have a very unfair expectation of what is an amazing nutrition approach, but you're going to have an unfair expectation of it insofar as probably expecting something that's so effective that it can be an antidote, an automatic antidote to all of your bad habits with food, all of your bad habits in terms of mindset around health. And I just don't think that's fair. Rather, how I've learned to see it is like this: the healing power, it's really woo-woo, it's not really my style, but the healing power, let's say, that plant foods can provide, well, that potential is at a glass ceiling, is totally limited by my inability to stay compliant. If I'm not compliant because of my bad habits, X, Y, and Z, for example, the potential that a plant-based diet has for me is incredibly limited. Basically, it's all on me. I take the responsibility. Yes, this nutrition approach has an amazing potential from a weight loss perspective. Why? Well, that's a different video. But this is still on me. Right, number 3, and I think this is one of the best insights I could possibly give to those of you who are very, very new to plant-based eating: keep it ridiculously simple. Okay, we're talking practical over pretentious, guys. There's a lot of fancy and elaborate recipes in vegan cookbooks, and they are delicious, but do you really want to be spending 45 minutes to an hour preparing a single meal? Okay, admittedly, it's different if you're batch cooking that meal and you make 4 or 5 servings, fair enough, you can make that exception. But do you really want to be making meals with 15 to 20 ingredients like you'll find in some of these cookbooks? And there are lots of amazing vegan recipes now online. It's got huge in my 10 years doing this. Lots of amazing plant-based recipes you'll find online. But in fact, I speak to people all the time, and it amazes me how overwhelmed people are. They're like, there's so much information out there. There's so many different dishes I could make. I see all of these YouTubers doing their what I eat in a day videos, and I've got all these delicious sounding meal ideas in my head. And I always say to folks, just pick 5 or 6 meals every week that you're going to rotate between. Just simplify it. And I've been doing this for 10 years. And every now and again, I do like the elaborate stuff, I must admit. But every week, even after 10 years doing this, every week I still ask myself, what are my staples this week? What are the 4 to 5 to 6 meals that I'm rotating between? And I'll stick to those. And every now and again, I get a little bit bored, something becomes a little bit stale, but I just mix it up, I switch it up. And this is, by the way, guys, a great advantage of doing things like bowls and plate templates, where you know that you're going to use a certain amount of whole grain, a certain amount of vegetables, what's your healthy fat source, portioning like that, versus recipes. I'm much more a fan of like bowl and plate templates over recipes, because the options are now endless, right? If I get bored of bulgur, I can switch to quinoa or to a rice. I can change my chickpeas to tofu or another kind of bean. I can mix up the veggies. One day I can do my tahini dressing. The next day I could do half an avocado here for the healthy fat source. I could do salsa and hot sauce and different toppings and whatnot. So there's so many different options under these little sort of plate templates and bowl templates. So that's why I love my butter bowls and things like this. You've got like 10 options in one if you think about all the combinations that you would enjoy, but keep it really simple, guys. Number 4, can you experience gas and digestive discomfort when transitioning to a plant-based diet? Yes, absolutely. This is very normal with major dietary change. even in fact many cases in minor dietary changes, especially with plant foods though, admittedly, given their higher fiber content, especially the soluble fiber, and some of the other compounds that some plant foods contain. Now, does this mean plant-based diets are inherently dangerous or unsuitable for some of us? No, on the contrary, and I know this is the argument that lots of the carnivores make. They always say indigestible plant matter, and that is absolute nonsense. It's one of those half-truths. The nutrient content in this way of eating is absolutely out of this world. It's incredible. But if you are not eating lots of this sort of food right now and you suddenly plow it into your system, your gut bacteria is saying, bloody hell, Rye, what are you feeding me? That's me speaking to myself, obviously. What are you feeding me? Right, that's a lot for your gut bacteria to handle before rather it's properly adapted to this way of eating. So you may need to go steady initially, would be my advice, especially with things like soluble fiber, especially with things perhaps like cruciferous vegetables. If you notice, you often have a bad reaction to those because of the FODMAPs, of course, and the sulfur compounds, that they contain. Drink plenty of water. That's really important for pushing the increased fiber through your system. Your gut microbiome, your gut bacteria, it will eventually get there. Beans and legumes as well. That's something I'm constantly asked about, especially by new plant-based dieters. Again, go steady with these if you're experiencing any flatulence or discomfort, guys. Stop rushing the process. The bacteria, your gut bacteria, will adapt in time, but give it a chance to change. And initially, if you start adding more of these things to your diet, don't suddenly blame the diet as opposed to the driver, right? Don't suddenly, the car, rather, I meant to say is the metaphor, as opposed to the driver, the car being the diet in this case, like, oh no, this is a sign that this can't work for me, that this isn't right for me. No, not necessarily. It just means your gut bacteria is used to absolute crap foods. This next one isn't actually nutrition related, but I wanted to include it anyway, but I won't be offended if you skip ahead to the next point if you're just food focused here. If you are vegan, and of course we could get into the discussion about the difference between plant-based diets and being vegan and whatnot, and some people use those interchangeably. But things like clothing, if you are vegan, let's say ethically, clothing and toiletries is actually much harder, actually, I would say, than the food. So yeah, be prepared to do some research on this stuff. Google is really useful. A little thing called Google at your fingertips. Just search everything, right? Vegan overcoats for men that don't contain wool. Just search this stuff and you will find it. Vegan toothpaste in UK supermarkets. You will find this stuff, right? There's other people been writing about this and researching this stuff for years. And, a lot of manufacturers now and a lot of shops are really on the ball with, making clear what products are vegan and whatnot because they know it sells well. So fellow men, especially, this is a tip to you. Clothing, not always easy. I think this lifestyle does actually cater to women better, or rather women's fashion, I must say, to be precise. But men, you will find stuff. I love Will's Vegan, is it Will's Vegan store? Will's Vegan Shoes in London. They do some great stuff. But you'll find stuff, just do your research. Number 6, all macronutrients play an essential role in the body, and I covered this in a recent video, so I won't harp on this one too much here. But 3 macronutrients, of course, being carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And I do see a small tendency amongst certainly new plant-based dieters and even corners of the more experienced plant-based nutrition space who are pretty anti, certainly the healthy fat sources, and are pretty pro the sort of carbitarian, sort of sub-plant-based diet, let's say. I want to be clear here, I don't think a high-carb diet from healthy sources, with those carbohydrate sources being predominantly very clean, healthy foods, whole plant foods, I don't think that is inherently wrong or dangerous or a mistake. I rather think, but what are you displacing, right? If a huge percentage of your overall calorie intake is coming from carbohydrate, what about the fat? What about the protein? And I don't want to sound like a total nutrition normie that's like, what about protein? What about protein? Because again, I think this is something that's really overemphasized in the mainstream health and weight loss world. However, at the same time, it's still important, right? All macronutrients play an essential but slightly different role in the body. And so are you eating so many carbohydrates, I would suggest, that you might be displacing a more than useful amount of fat and protein in the diet. And that is why I love these balanced plates and bowls, because we've got protein, we've got carb from the beans or the tofu or the tempeh, for example. We've got our healthy carbohydrate sources in terms of the whole grains or maybe potato, sweet potato. Vegetables, of course, contribute to our carb intake as well. We've got our healthy fats, the tahini, in the tahini and the hummus. This is not hummus, but the tahini dressing here, or the avocado, the nuts and seeds, the nut butters and whatnot. Balance, right? All three macronutrients being present, because they all do different things. And speaking of healthy fats, number 7 here is about omega-3. Something that was quite useful, I think, for me to figure out early on here was that 1 to 2 tablespoons of flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, that was easily enough for adequate omega-3 intake. However, and this is an important caveat, taking that DHA/EPA supplement from algae oil, I think it's advisable to guarantee the effective ALA conversion. And go and research this stuff for yourself. I've done videos on this. I don't want to open this can of worms because it's kind of a 5-minute explanation as to what that all means and how actually there's also a relationship between omega-3 and 6, and it's not necessarily about maximizing but getting the appropriate amount of those. It is a bit of a can of worms, but I just think even if you are getting those omega-3 sources, I like as a safety net, I like the DHA/EPA supplement. Number 8, the controversial one. It shouldn't be, but it is. You don't need to count your calories, but calories still count. There's a lot of teachers in the plant-based community that will verbatim tell you you can eat as much as you want as long as it's whole plant foods. Eat plant-based and you can eat unlimited. I don't agree whatsoever, right? If you're rapidly losing weight and you're hungry all the time, and your hair's starting to fall out, well, you might not be eating enough calories, of course. If you're gaining weight, at the adverse end of the spectrum, if you're gaining weight and you're thinking, hold on, I'm eating plant-based, like I'm only eating whole foods, how am I gaining weight? What's this about, right? Someone online told me I can eat as much as I want as long as it's plant-based. What's going on here? You're probably eating too many calories. The calories still count, the calories still matter. Even if the composition of your diet is very clean, is very healthy, excuse the wobbly camera here, calories still matter. Regardless, calories still matter. So watch for those signs, that your calorie intake might be too low or it might be too high, and adjust accordingly. Otherwise, and I've seen this is so sad, but I've seen this time and time again, otherwise you're going to flake out of plant-based eating thinking, oh, it didn't really work for me. Yeah, because you were starving yourself, mate, because you're only eating fruits and vegetables and it was like 1,000 calories a day. That's never going to be sustainable. Number 9, it might be another controversial one, but coconut oil, in my opinion, is not a health food. And what you'll very quickly find when you start turning labels over in grocery stores of anything that's even a little bit processed, coconut oil's in a lot of this stuff, and a lot of these vegan substitutes and alternatives and vegan mock meats and whatnot got a lot of coconut oil in these things. And I think the misconception about coconut oil, and there was a lot of research done on this 20 years ago, is that because it contains MCTs, it's good. I think something containing a nutrient or a food containing something that is beneficial is not enough to necessarily say that it's a healthy food if there's other things that are questionable in that food product. Does that make sense? I think it's very calorically rich. I think it's packed with saturated fat. You know, a level tablespoon of it is going to be somewhere between 120 and 140 calories. Maybe you're not interested from a weight loss perspective, but still really, really high in saturated fat. I have it on occasion, but I mostly avoid this stuff, and I certainly wouldn't have it in the house. So yeah, that's why I kind of, even to this day, I'm even though I'm in weight maintenance, even though I'm really happy with how not to sound braggadocious, but how my physique is shaping up, I'm not about the coconut oil because I still don't want that saturated. Never mind the calories, I don't want the saturated fat. Number 10, and piggybacking on that previous point where I mentioned coconut oil being very prevalent in lots of vegan processed foods. Well, what I want to say is vegan junk food is still junk food. It's terrible for you in most cases, and you can argue it's better ethically, and you might be able to argue that it's better health-wise if you compare product to product. It depends what the products in question are, of course, because animal products are not being contained, so maybe there isn't as much saturated fat if the coconut oil isn't present, yada, yada, yada. But lots of the products made nowadays that you'll find in the vegan section of your grocery store, they are pure rubbish. And food manufacturers very well know that the vegan trend is booming and they're capitalizing on this. And I want to be clear here, I'm not Mr. Perfect, I'm not Mr. Righteous with my diet, I'm not Mr. Consistent clean eating always around the clock, but I would say 90% of the stuff I eat is whole food. So I'm mostly focused on the whole plant foods, like I've talked about throughout the entirety of this video, like I constantly show on my channel here, like I'm about to devour when I finally finish this little tirade here. Eating those things mostly is when I'm going to feel my best. Number 11, travel. Travel is fine and travel is possible. I did Asia, as many of you know, for 5 months last year. I've just moved to Eastern Europe, and I'm doing the air quotes there because I don't really count Prague necessarily as Eastern Europe as such. It's kind of very westernized. But point made, right, I was fine. I've gone to all these different places and I've visited all these different places. I've lived in many different places and I've been fine. And yes, I do have to do levels of research that maybe an omnivore wouldn't, even a health-conscious omnivore wouldn't, like Happy Cow and Googling things. But honestly, guys, it's not really a burden to me, and this is the realization you'll have if you feel really, really committed and compelled to give this way of eating and this lifestyle a shot anyway. Like, it won't feel like a burden to you because it will change your life so much, or you might feel ethically so strongly about doing this, that there is never even remotely an inkling of, oh, do I have to even bother? Do I have to always bother? Maybe not today, I don't have to worry about it. What? That's not even remotely an excuse when you feel committed and dedicated to something, is it? Now, of course, there are some, let's be honest, there are some locales, there are some destinations that are more or less suitable than others. China, as soon as you venture outside of Beijing, you know, that gets challenging. Even in Beijing, it's challenging, it's not easy. Japan, the same goes once you leave the big cities. But Thailand, for example, on the flip side, was a breeze last year. And I was there for the best part of 3 months in Bangkok last year, and it was a breeze most of the time. Western Europe and North America is comparatively a breeze too. But I don't care even if it's not a breeze. I think that's the point I'm making here, because my ethical decision to be vegan comes first, and that's far more important than my own convenience. And even if there isn't the vegan angle on it for you, maybe you're just trying the plant-based thing and you're not necessarily connecting the dots on the ethical aspect, even being a health-conscious plant-based eater who mostly, again, wants to eat the whole plant foods that we've talked about throughout this video, well, that's another layer of criteria for selecting locations, isn't it? But it is doable. You know, sushi and salad bars and poke places and smoothies and acai, the amount of acai I consumed last year on my Asian travels, it was awesome, right? These are things that you can mostly, in most cases, find all over the world. And even when I can't, I just use my 10 years of reference experience to pick what I feel like will be the best option in the moment. And you might be rightly thinking, Ryan, I don't have 10 years of reference experience yet. I don't always know. The answers are always online. The answers are always at your fingertips. And who cares if you eat something once in a while that is a little bit more processed and it isn't so whole plant foodsy? What does it matter? Just get back on the wagon from your next meal. You're traveling, you're living life. No worries, mate. Not too much of an issue. And lastly, number 12, I want to finish on one of the big criticisms / myths of plant-based eating that I quickly came to realize was a load of absolute nonsense, and it was something I used to put stock into. Soy. Right, I think people hear that soy contains phytoestrogen and they just hear the estrogens part and they totally freak out. Phytoestrogens and estrogen, guys, they are not the same thing. This is a huge misconception. The phytoestrogens in soy have a much, much weaker effects, and they can both be estrogenic or actually anti-estrogenic. To be honest, it's a really, really complex subject, and I've got to be careful not to reduce it to some very, very simplistic binary statement. It is a complex topic, but ultimately it is not as simple as eat loads of soy equals estrogen increases. Like, it is nowhere near that straightforward. It's nowhere near that simplistic. And soy, like tofu, tempeh, edamame, right, young soybeans, they also come with a bunch of other benefits: high in fiber, low in saturated fat, cholesterol free, of course, and a good source of antioxidants. So there's a lot of myths about plant-based nutrition, and there's a lot that I busted along the way, and I've covered some here today. But soy was one of the big ones early on where I was like, yeah, this is horse. And of course, important disclaimer, there are some people that are rightly allergic to soy. That's, of course, a notable exception to what I'm talking about here. Right, that's it. 12 big lessons, insights, reflections, whatever you want to call them. I've got so much more. This video could be hours and hours long. So guys, drop a comment below if you'd like to see a part 2 for this video. We've covered a few negatives here as well, like beware of this, don't fall into this trap, don't make this mistake with the plant-based diet. I just want to say, as much as we've worked through the kinks here, and hopefully I've given you some food for thought about some of the negatives that might crop up with this way of eating. I've done this for 10 years. I wouldn't do something for 10 years so stubbornly if it was harming me. Like, I love this, it's changed my life, and I think now I'm sort of wrapping up to the conclusion here. I'm thinking, hold on, of the 12 things I've covered here, have I actually covered that many positives? Maybe not, but I think hopefully the duration that I've been doing this speaks for itself, that actually I've really, really loved this, and it has been a massive positive influence. And anything that I've had to work around has been anything I've covered here that I've had to work around, and you may have to work around, it pales in comparison to how amazing and revolutionary and life-changing this has been for me. So yeah, I love it, and I just wanted to add that in at the end. If you're just
running into me for the first time here on YouTube, hit subscribe for more plant-based diet and weight loss advice. You can also catch me on Instagram. I've got other resources, down, such as the link to my Instagram down in the description box below. See you next time. Hope you found this useful. Speak soon.